Hey, Mike, how are you?
I'm doing swell. How you doing, Bob?
I'm doing great. It's a Thursday. Welcome to everybody to the Pop Culture SquadCast Live. We have a good show tonight. We have a great guest. Mike, did you know that we are entering the finale of the unplanned 3-night trip with Texas creators?
Okay. No, I did not. And
So,
you're already wired to explain it, right?
well, our tonight we have a guest. We have Terry Moore on the show, which we're super excited, very, very excited um, to have Terry on the show. Last 2 nights ago, we had Chip Mosher on, who is a Texas native, lived in Texas.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yes.
And the night before, and the show before that was Joe Eisma, who's also a Texas native. So
That's
we have
true.
it's just Texas after Texas. And even weirder is we're gonna have a break next week. But when we come back, our guest is gonna be Chris Condon, who wrote That Texas Blood. So we're just all over Texas for some weird reason. And it's not intentional, believe me.
It's the closest I'm going to get these days to Texas. So it's fine by me. There are a lot of good people in Texas
Sure.
that are ruled by a lot of bad people. So
Yeah. We're gonna get to Terry's gonna be here soon. I'm super excited about it. He's I have a lot of good things. We have a lot of good things to talk about with him. I do want to take a second and mention a couple of passings. One, and I'll give you this first because we just kind of I know I just kind of hit you with this before we went live, but Ed Cedarstrom passed away yesterday, and he was a writer in his own right, but part of our community and part of your community. His husband was Howard Cruz, legendary cartoonist. Do you want to say a word or two?
well, yeah, I mean, I really like Ed and Howard, and it's the news just hit me. You just told me, so
Yeah, sorry about that.
I'm kind of integrating it. Um, our friend Martha Thomas runs this beautiful party every year, so it's sort of a Christmas, Hanukkah, donut, and corned beef party. So I'm there, and Howard and Ed used to go there every year, as did people like Denny O'Neil. And I mean, I can give you a long list.
Sure,
And
it is the party. It is the party of the season.
and we're every year we seem to get a year older, not necessarily a year smarter, and the crowd gets a little thinner each year. So your news at the same time as when Martha announced her party this year, just hit me right between the eyes. Ed was a great guy. I loved seeing him. I loved hanging out with him, and I even love the fact that he and I once got into a conversation so intense that Howard was jealous. That's the first time that ever happened to me in terms of a same sex situation, and, and I loved it. I loved every minute of it, and Howard knew that. He saw that. That was something. So yeah, the news is sad. You very sad. I mean, you don't get used to the death part. You get familiar with the people dying part.
Yeah. Yeah, it's sad. We know, some of our friends are hurting from that, and I know that wasn't I don't know that it was terribly surprising, but not necessarily expected at this moment. So our condolences go out to them. Um the comics community is this incredible net of people and personalities and um there's if you know someone in comics, you know almost everybody in comics, right? There's because everyone will tell you, you hear these stories, oh, let me introduce my friend, and I do the same thing, and people do it to me, and we all want our friends to be friends. and the community lost someone who I didn't know. Um, but I'm very sad. Very sad that they've passed away, and so we do want to take a moment to remember Claudine Nee,
Mm,
who was who passed away over the last couple of days. I'm not sure exactly which day, but um, she ran, my understanding, ran Artist Alley at San Diego Comic Con. Um, she There have been some outpourings of loss. Um, the the statement from Comic Con International is, it is with deep and profound sadness that we announced the passing of Claudine Nee, a member of the Comic Con family and longtime volunteer. Claudine was instrumental in overseeing Artist Alley. Her advocacy and promotion of independent artists resulted in thousands of friendships whose artists and with those artists and anyone who knew her. We extend our heartfelt condolences to her sister Sarah, her brother John, and the rest of her family, and all those who are fortunate enough to call her friend. And we do the same here at Pop Culture Squad.
she was one of the quiet, publicly invisible, almost invisible people who have broadened our awareness of what comics are and what they should be and what they could be by running that Artist Alley in San Diego. She gave exposure. She helped give exposure to a lot of people who otherwise would have had a hard time, scoring a table and getting in front of the public. So to me, that there is no higher calling than for her to say, "Yeah, you're good. Let's other people give other people the chance to discover you." That's just a wonderful thing. Um, San Diego is still the biggest and technically the most important show. I'm not sure what that means anymore, but it's the bellwether, and she's not certainly not the first person from San Diego to have passed on, but I truly regret that. And her and guys like Shel Dorf, and you know, just a good group of people.
Yeah. I want to share one thing that Katie Cook had posted, and this was, Katie is a friend of the show. She's been on the show, and she's a super wonderful person. But what she wrote was, Claudine was an amazing friend to so many of us. She was absolutely cherished by the comics community, and I'm sincerely grateful that she was part of my life. And then she, in her comments section, because it's Katie, said this woman gave baby Katie her first SDCC Artist Alley table 5 million years ago and was a steadfast presence in almost every July from there on out. Being sad is an understatement. Being upset doesn't cover it.
Yeah,
Um, I've seen people such as Cully Hamner. I've seen others, posting about how she cut them breaks, she got them in, she helped them get that first shot, and they are here now because of her. It's just very sad. I know she had a lot of medical issues, and she wasn't doing, great physically for some time. But it's just really sad. And we want to take a minute to celebrate how much this community thrives on supporting each other and how much people mean to each other.
we're very good at supporting each other. I've said this before, but we're even on a first name basis with people we don't like, and,
Sure.
and they're not even necessarily in the room. We'll talk about them and say, "Oh yeah, that crawling piece of shit. I love him."
Yeah.
Sin, right? We're an incredibly tightly knit community. I hope that never goes away. I have been in many professional communities, nothing, nowhere as strong and as binding and as supportive as the comics community. And that is why I have been so proud to be a member of this community.
Uh, Thank you. I agree with that. Um, so again, to anyone who's you know dealing with this loss, we send our thoughts with you. I want to change topics just a little bit, and I don't mean to be callous about it, but we do have a guest who's going to be here shortly, and there are a couple of things I want to talk about what's going on in comics. So I think we'll throw this under cool stuff. So cool stuff. All right. What is the cool stuff? There's been an announcement of all the comics that are going to be out at Free Comic Book Day this May. There's a lot of them. There's a lot of crossover weird stuff. There's some interesting. I want to, at least for tonight, take away two of the most interesting things that I found, and it, I'm being selfish. And they're both from Mad Cave. Surprise, surprise. First is this Speed Racer Comics, Free Comic Book Day #1, or 0 issue.
Number 0.
Number
Yes,
0.
Books, right. we start counting with 0.
0,
we
and we're
never
going to
would have been published in Rome.
We'll get to Mark 5, and then eventually we'll get to X. So, because it's, I've known about this one for a little bit. Since New York, I was talking to someone, and I may have seen some of the preliminary proposals that were going to go to Tatsunoko for this. So the writer of the book was announced also today. It is David Pepos, which is pretty cool. I'm excited for him to see what his take is. I like the designs. I know someone who was working on the designs and was trying to do something. I know that for fans of Speed Racer, the car will not change. There will be no updating, no changing. The car stays the same. That's what I've heard. There was another announcement, which I didn't know for sure, but I had a good feeling that was going to happen. And Mad Cave is also bringing back 2 comics, The Phantom. And I'm really tempted to sing the bit from Defenders of the Earth where it says, the ghost who walks, but I'm not gonna, because I'm a terrible singer. But I love The Phantom. I am very excited for this. I know nothing about who's writing it, who's drawing it. I'm just happy that we're going to get an option to have The Phantom back in comics and see what that goes.
One of these days, I will tell you about my involvement with Lee Falk. We were involved in several different things, but King Features was in the process of making my life miserable, and I was just about to take on The Phantom as an editor.
Well, they were making your life miserable for Flash Gordon at the time.
For Flash Gordon, yeah. None of the people who were involved in this are still with King Features,
right?
So, or have been for a long time. But I'll give you the quick version. I told Lee what was going on with Flash Gordon, and I said, well, we have our first meeting at King Features this Friday, and I'm looking forward to seeing you there. And Lee says, Friday. And I says, yeah. Oh, geez, I'm sorry. I thought they'd already told you. I'm sorry, and I apologized, and I set the whole thing up. I wasn't surprised they didn't tell him. In point of fact, I strongly suspect they didn't want him there.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. And Lee had me sitting. He came in, sat at the front of the table, and had me sit at his left hand. Lee came in with the mandrake cape and top hat and a little bolo tie with a little Phantom clasp on it, and the Phantom's rings, and a cane. Not that part really didn't surprise me. For some reason, it surprised some of the people at King Features, but there was no way in the world that they were going to mess with him, because he could gesture hypnotically or something and turn them all into elephants. And he saved the day, and he helped make the Phantom during our runs at DC a much better book by buying me the freedom that I needed.
That's awesome.
To do the book his way, because of course it's Lee Falk. Whose way are you going to do it?
Who did that book for you?
Um,
Sorry, didn't mean to throw you on the spot.
I know.
I know I have it. I just don't remember who was doing that run.
Well, I know Peter David wrote some of it, and I don't know why I'm blocking. It's probably has something to do with the fact that I'm older than shit. But it'll occur to me about
Oh,
3
that's
more.
awesome. I know we've talked about the problems you had with King and Flash Gordon. So to hear that went better is good.
Yes.
Thanks to Lee.
Well, because of Lee.
Right.
And I have to, since we're talking about Texans here.
We are talking about Texans.
I have to shout out to Anthony Tollin, who's probably the world's biggest Phantom fan and old radio fan and pulp character fan, and one of the most knowledgeable people on all those subjects in the world.
Absolutely.
He had helped me get it together with Lee long before that, so I knew Lee pretty well, and those guys, those old timers who helped create this industry. I was so thrilled to meet Lee Falk the first time. He's been doing comics. He had been doing comics since the 30s, like 32. The Phantom since 36. Beautiful, beautiful stuff. Wonderful writer. Enduring character in most cities, in most countries, which is saying a lot because we don't do newspaper comic strips in America anymore, except for online.
Right.
Because we don't do newspapers anymore.
Which I guess is, kind of a good reason why our guest got out of doing comic strips, because they've kind of gone a little bit sideways. But I think that if ever there was somebody whose brain needed to be downloaded into, a MODOK or Arlen Zola or something to be captured so that we don't ever lose it, it would be Anthony Tollin, because I think he knows more about most things that nobody knows anything about than anybody ever.
I discovered that in 1976 during my first tour, DC Comics. Jeanette Kahn was taking me on
sure.
And she just gotten the job a couple of months previous, and Tony was in production, and we just started talking, and about 2 hours later I left. It was just a long conversation. It was great.
He was great. We had him on the show a couple of years ago. We had him on the Colorist Appreciation Night show. It was really, really cool. It was a lot of fun. All right. There's some new number ones out this week. I encourage everybody to go to popculturesquad.com and check out the new number ones. There are some interesting things. It's a weird kind of week. I think next week is also weird because of Thanksgiving and stuff like that. We're getting into the holiday season. A lot of publishers are kind of slowing back on starting new stuff unless it's something like they really want to grab at the end of the year, but it's the end of the year. So we're in that phase where we're going to get some new interesting things, but not a whole lot of new number ones, probably until about February. But we're going to keep going with them. There's a bunch of new ones out.
A lot in February.
Well, yeah. February is going to be crazy. All right. We're going to bring in our guest because we have a lot to talk about. He has a Kickstarter going on right now, so there's stuff going on with that. I met our guest. It was probably 2014 or 15, whichever year he was at Baltimore, because he doesn't go every year. It's kind of every other-ish or so. And I had, I was familiar with his work for a lot of creator-owned stuff, and I had read some Strangers in Paradise, but I wasn't fully caught up on it. And I bought Rachel Rising from him at the time, and I think it was I bought volume 1, but volume 3 was out or something. And I haven't stopped reading everything he writes from then on forever, and I've gone back and read almost everything else he's written and drawn and created. He makes comics that make me happy in ways that I don't know that I want to be happy. And
you're gonna have to explain that.
We'll get to it. And before let's bring him in. So I'm ready. Let's bring in some Terry Moore for all of you folks. Hey, Terry.
That was fun. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, Terry.
Hi, how are you, Mike?
I'm doing great.
Robert's excited about the Lady Supreme cover.
Oh, man. That Lady Supreme cover, there's a story there.
I'm sure there is.
Yeah, that one got out of my control. And when people hand me one to sign, I sign right over the stripper boobs.
Nice. You should. Absolutely. Listen, let's talk about the Kickstarter because it's still going on. There's 8 days left. What is this Kickstarter? It's covers, right?
Yeah.
It's all the covers, all the Terry Moore covers.
Yeah. And for a very good reason. I mean, I'm sure you guys will agree with me. You know, I've had probably close to 300 covers. Well, if you were here on the ride, very few people were there all along picking them up and kept them.
Right.
So they're long gone. I mean, that's gone like a candy bar you ate in high school. You'll never see it again. And now it's just omnibuses or digital collections or whatever. So anybody who was born in the 21st century has never seen all that stuff. And I thought it would be nice to have a book that has all the covers for my series. And that's about 300 covers. And for the first time, publish them without titles and graphics and issue numbers and prices on them. So you can just see the art. So it's generic covers, and only a handful, might be like 4 or 5 or 6 of them that were made back in the wild frontier days of Photoshop 2.0. There's only a handful that don't have generics. But other than that, and when I was digging back through it, I realized I had something, again, you had to be there. But, you have to solicit this stuff like 3 or 4 months in advance. And sometimes I was in the middle of a cliffhanger. And I don't want to show the cover that's going to give away the cliffhanger. Like, what do you mean we're celebrating the funeral of so-and-so? What happened to so-and-so? So I would run red herring covers for Diamond catalogs or the distributor catalogs. And so I ended up with like 8 red herring covers that no one's really ever seen if they didn't get a Diamond catalog.
Oh, so there were different ones in the Diamond catalog. That's awesome.
Yeah, there were these fake ones, these dummy covers that I would solicit with, and then the real cover came out, and so for the first time, I'm running the red herring covers, and there were
awesome.
Quite a few of them.
Well, that's a twist on the variant cover scheme.
Yeah, it's not like it's not like I changed color palettes for the reprint. This is actually has nothing to do with the story. So yeah, it's totally different thing.
Well, that's great because there's a science as well as an art to doing covers. I mean, that's what's ostensibly supposed to be selling the book to newcomers, to people who aren't already there reading the book every month. Lately, DC has been reprinting their variant covers. It just did it with Wonder Woman, which was very, very nice, and Batman, which was nice. And I'd seen a couple of those. And I really like it because you normally don't get a chance to see all those variant covers, and Lord knows I'm not going to go spend $12,000 for one, even no matter how much I like it. So I admire you for thinking this one through. 300 pages worth of your covers makes a statement. I'm looking forward to seeing that statement.
Thank you.
So, the process of cultivating this and going back and looking at some of this stuff, were there things that surprised you? Were there things that you were horrified by? How was that process of putting this book together? Or was it just like, oh yeah, I remember that. I remember that. I remember that. I remember that.
Oh gosh, I remember every one of them.
Sure.
And the horrifying part is when I look back at, if you work nonstop for 30 years, there's going to be a period of burnout or a period of, I did that one on vacation and I rushed it or something.
Sure.
So I see that stuff now, and you got to live with it now. But the weird thing for me was I went through a period where I wasn't drawing well. And I don't know if you've heard other artists talk about this, but, and I don't want to make too big of a deal of it, because it'd be like one of those things in nature. If I point it out, you'll never unsee it. But, there's artists, when they burn out, they get to where they're not drawing with the same synergism. They're not into it. And if you're not into it, it's like singing flat or something like that. It's like if you sing a song, it's like da 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 da, versus like you're singing like you're in Disturbed or something, that with Committed. And there's something to it where your heart needs to be in it. So I saw that first, where I would get into like, oh, this little section of SAP where the eyes don't line up or the face doesn't look as pretty as I would change that drawing now.
Yeah, I'm not saying the best part about what Robert kind of mentioned as the slump is, for the most part, the artist sees it more than other people, right?
Absolutely.
But there's a point where I've seen it in people. I've seen where artists aren't as dialed in, and then. And I can't say that I saw it with you, but then oftentimes and hopefully that comes around and they come out of that, and they become rejuvenated and refocused, and that's cool. But the cool part is, the interesting part, that's what I was talking about. Like, is there stuff that's horrifying to you? Like you go back and you're like, oh yeah, I wasn't hitting it there. But is there something that through this process, is there a cover that you came across that you're like, I didn't remember how much I love this cover?
Yeah. The first time, I was just kind of doing I was always, as an artist, you're always chasing a dream cover where you draw it perfectly like somebody you admire. The first time I ever got a cover that came back to me from the colorist, and when I saw it in color, I was just like, I can't believe I'm part of that. I had anything to do with that. It looks like that came from somebody else. Was Strangers in Paradise 8, number 8, volume 2, number 8, where Kachu is crouching. I can pull it out right here.
I'll get it. I have it. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. Volume 2, number 8, where she's crouching in winter clothes. And the colorist did such a great job. And I'm trying to remember who it was at the time. It may have been Pat at the time. So I've gone through several colorists, but yeah, that one surprised me. And then after that, once I knew that I could get a magic cover, from then on, I was always trying to get a magic drawing.
Of course. I think all three of us are quite aware of, that is a nice cover. Yeah. All three of us are quite aware of folks, writers and artists, who refuse to look at their older work because they hate it. I get that. I totally understand that. But we know what went into it. And we know where we could have done better if we only had a little bit more time, or if some idiot wasn't being a jerk or whatever. The reader doesn't. So I learned a long, long time ago, you have to be very careful what you say about something when they give it to you to sign or whatever. You don't want to say, oh, I hated that, because they loved it. And they have every right to love it. They paid their, whatever it was, $12.50 for the comic book or whatever. And they read it and they enjoyed it and they brought it to you to sign it. So I never would make those value judgments in public, because quite frankly, why should I piss on their parade?
Right.
They had a good time, and that's my job. That's our job. That's great.
You can get that combination just right for the public. It may not be the combination you were looking for.
Right.
But, maybe they wouldn't have liked your exact combination. Maybe your exact combination would have been perfect and sterile to them. But the way you messed up a little bit, it suddenly took on a whole new emotional. Think about that in music. Haven't you seen cases where like the guitar player said, my solo on take 3 was better, but we all listened to take 4 on the Steely Dan record or whatever.
Right.
And now on YouTube, you can go and that guitarist can complain and play take 3. And I don't like it at all. He likes it because he got all the stuff right, you know. But take 4 was the one that did something nobody's ever done before. His mistake was something that was never done before. Thank God for giving me something fresh to listen to. I'm so tired of hearing it done perfectly. And it can be that way with art too.
That's right. That's exactly right. You know, many years ago, I produced a bunch of records. I have a music background in broadcasting and record production. And what was astonishing to me was that when you're mixing down the tracks, the bands would never agree on anything. And nice people, but they'd fight to the death over something that seemed irrelevant. So what I quickly learned was to discuss the tracks with the entire band first, sometimes on a, you know, several different occasions, and then keep them out of the session, out of the mixdown session. Otherwise, you never get it finished. You play it for them and they may talk a little bit, but usually if they ask for changes, that's great. But it's not as bad as if everybody's fighting for their vision. And their vision is right. It's just that there's like 6 of them.
You know, it's like pulling together all the notes on a piano, and the producer has the final player. But every one of those people notes, aka notes, has a different resonance, and they're doing their job. But you have to like, okay, let me just look at that recipe.
It's interesting because Mike, I think that probably some of the experience you got there helped as you became an editor in comics, where you have to bring people's different perspectives together.
Yes.
That is something that Terry doesn't have to deal with for the last 20 something years.
And boy,
because he is a virtuoso in abstract comics, other than Robin running everything. Right.
Yeah. And you know what? Since we're doing music metaphors here, music is the reason I'm an indie comics guy.
Yeah, let's tell it.
Totally get that.
Let me show you something. See this?
Yep.
What do you think of when you see that?
It's gorgeous. I know it means something. I just don't know what it means. But
this is the symbol of every, rock guitar hero,
right,
from the 70s and 80s before they got into shredder guitars and stuff. So when I was a teenager, I wanted this guitar, the same one that Jimmy Page and all my other heroes had, Jeff Beck and Joe Walsh and all that. And when I was in my teens and 20s, I was in bands that were always copy bands because they could get work. That way you could get in the clubs and all that. And the talk was, we'll find our way to become an original band and try to make it. But you're in a copy band working on playing other people's stuff. Next thing you know, my 20s were over. And I had to, support my family and all that. And I had to think of something else besides, $50 on a Saturday night to feed my wife and child. So I turned to other things. And now as I got older and I began reading the histories of people who did succeed in music, it's because they did what young cartoonists do, which is a cartoonist, finds their style pretty early on. They have a lot of influences. They take it all in, they make a new recipe, and then the more you draw like yourself. So they start off like a Jim Lee clone, and after about 3,000 drawings, they're drawing like Skippy, whoever they are. And I didn't do that. With my music, I was always basically, when I looked at it like this, playing this guitar for 10 years in copy bands was like working on comic book icons that belonged to other people. And I knew that once I got a chance in comics, if I started working for DC, that I may end up in DC and they would eat me up and spit me out and swap me for the next cooler artist in about 5 years. And,
Yep.
I would be struggling for work. But if I made my own book that nobody else is making, like Strangers in Paradise, there's not another one out there, then nobody can fire me. And I'm rolling the dice that I'm good enough to be a solo artist. And I didn't do it in music, so I thought I'm not going to blow it again. And when I got to comics, that's the reason why I did that. Because I got an offer when I was showing Strangers in Paradise #1 in Xerox format. I went to a convention and a lot of DC editors were at the table, at the DC table, and including Archie Goodwin, and he offered me a job to get started on, say, like spin-off books or something like that. But I took my copy and I continued going around the room showing it to retailers saying, if this comes out as a comic, would you buy it, order it? And they would flip through it and see the page where Francine is stripping in the park. And they said, hell yeah. So
Good page. It's a good page.
I got my offer from Antarctic to do it and to start it off, and I took it. And I just stayed that path ever since.
The difference between, I admire that. The difference between you and me is that Archie Goodwin, with whom I shared a wall at DC, said, "Oh yeah, let me give you some work here. Let's see what we can do." I would do it just because it's Archie Goodwin.
Oh yeah.
But other than that, because the collaborative experiences, you learn from that, and you also have to hone your craft for that. You have to know what you're doing. There's a good reason in your startup days, I think, to be working on projects that you don't necessarily have full control over, so that you can learn, so people can feel better about saying, well, try this, and you go, oh my God, I never saw that. Well, you'll never not see it now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That story kind of ties into a couple of things that I want to talk about tonight. And I'm very excited to do this, but you did Strangers in Paradise. Strangers in Paradise, by the time you started doing some work for hire stuff for other companies, whether it was Image or Marvel and DC, you did stuff. When you did that, do you think that because you were Terry Moore, who does Strangers in Paradise, at that point, you approached that work differently?
Yeah, it kept me from trying to draw like their popular artist.
Right.
If I didn't have any track record and I go to a company who has 3-star artists that are selling 1 million books, you would try your hardest to either lean towards them stylistically, like everybody's doing Batman, where they're going to use a lot of ink. It's a lot of noir. Or you can come in and shake it up and be the goofball odd thing. But I had a track record, and I couldn't be what I was not. So I had this more cartoony style, this kind of, I don't know, this look that I had to stick with. And every time I would get off of it a little bit, somebody would call me on it, and I'd be a little embarrassed. So I tried to stick with my style the whole way.
You are who you are, and you can't adapt that to everything. So after a while, you'll learn how to call your shots, even when it comes to taking a risk, to doing something you've never done before. You still know what's kind of next to your wheelhouse.
Mm-hmm.
You can make that move. but you got to do it. You got to think about it. You got to do it one step at a time and get there.
Some people have been able to make a living off of being a chameleon, but I didn't start that way. You are who you are. And,
Right.
think of yourself like a singer. You can't suddenly get up there and sing differently and everybody knows what you really sound like.
Yeah. Well, except for Bob Dylan.
Yeah. Well, he only has 2 grooves.
So I want to talk just a little bit about your work for hire stuff, and then we'll get off it because it's important. You worked on things like it's interesting. I didn't realize that you were the first writer after Chuck Dixon on Birds of Prey. I knew you did Birds of Prey. I have a copy of Birds of Prey that you and Jimmy and Amanda all signed. I just need to get Phil to sign it. But I didn't realize that you'd taken directly after Chuck. And it's interesting because I love to look at the history of things, and I look at there's 3 issues and then there's a 4th issue, and the cover says your name on it, but Beto wrote it. So that raises questions for me. So I guess my question I'm trying to come down to is, what was the most rewarding work for hire experience that you did after you started doing Strangers in Paradise, and you went work for other people and take their assignments? What was the most rewarding one of those?
The one I enjoyed the most was Fables. Because it appealed to the satirist in me, and Bill Willingham, he said, "Is there anything you don't want to draw?" And I said, "I don't want to draw architecture. Don't give me a lot of buildings or something." So he drew a story. He wrote a story with a lot of buildings that happens in the town.
Yeah,
Like Bill,
I looked at that issue yesterday.
But what I loved doing it was that he gave me the freedom to create inside the story. For instance, it's about Sleeping Beauty laying on the pedestal in the middle of the town square, and because she's asleep, the town is now overgrown with moss. So I had to draw all this quaint medieval square and moss on everything, and but then these little gnomes come in, the evil gnomes come in and kidnap her. And I had this idea that they all ran like dorks and, like the old cartoons, and they were all left-handed. So everything they did was left-handed, and they did all this malicious stuff. And I had so much fun doing that. And I got to draw my Mad Magazine satire version of all the characters and the spinoffs. And there was a little side band playing a flute and something else. And I really enjoyed drawing all that. I could just kind of do my, Don Martin, whatever type spinoff on those characters. And that was a lot of fun. And Bill didn't say no. He let it go.
It's interesting because, like I said, I reread that issue yesterday because I was looking. I'm like, oh, there's a Fables issue, and we went and grabbed it. And and as I was reading it, the interesting thing is, it was reminding me of, and this is funny, it was reminding me of Babs, which is currently being published by Ahoy Comics that Jason Burrows is drawing. And if I ever get a chance to meet Jason, I'm going to ask him because I can see there's a lot of similarities there to what you did in that issue versus what they're doing right now in Babs, which is kind of interesting. And so that kind of plays into the other point that I wanted to get to. And we've been talking about this, kind of talking around it. How do you reconcile the fact that you were part of a group of young cartoonists trying to do their own thing in the 90s, and now you're an inspiration to young cartoonists who are trying to do the same thing? How do you reconcile that in your life?
I like the fact that artists just go till they drop. You can't age out as an artist. So thank God I'm not a pop icon or something where it doesn't matter how old you are if you're an artist, a painter, a writer, a musician. Sure. You can't age out. So I'm happy about that. And I think it's our our responsibility to share everything we've picked up with any young person that wants to listen to it. The young artists, the young writers, pass it on, because we're like a ship in the ocean, and when the new kids come along, you've got to tell them how to survive out there. So
You have to remember all the people who, even just by giving you one or two words, made you a better artist. Every performer, writer, artist, musician, as you said, every performer who has made it, who's been around long enough, owes it to Earth to bring up the next generation and the one after that. It's you got to prime the pump. We are part of something greater. Bob and I were talking at the beginning of the show about the comics community and how wonderful it is. And it is. It's really wonderful, more so than any of the others, because I suspect because there isn't as much money at risk here. But you damn well better be prepared to sit down and talk with people at conventions or wherever and help them out, because that's how you got where you are.
This is just how life works. I didn't just pop up out of thin air. I'm the product of two other sets of genetic humans that got together, and then there's this pyramid effect. I'm as old as the human race, and
That's right.
I am the front point line of it at this moment in time, and I owe everything I am to everybody that came ahead of me, and that's exactly how we are with the arts. If you can do anything on your Procreate iPad rig today, it's because of thousands of years of artists before you,
Right.
and that make you think and look that way. So think of all the stuff we've learned from the artists and writers ahead of us and picked up on all, so yeah, you got to pass it on. That's how genetics works. We're like little walking package of art and creative genetics, and you got to pass it on.
Absolutely. We also have to remember that little things that we have done that we may like, may not like, may have forgotten entirely about, going to influence somebody later on. Somebody's going to find that and go, wow, cool, or boy, this sucks. I can do this better, which is great. If you're learning and you're trying to figure out and you see something that you wish would be done another way, you're thinking it through, and that's good. That's a good muscle to develop. So we even have this inadvertent role. Mentoring is the most important thing in any field, in every field. Mentoring is critical. And I'm not saying that just because I'm an extraordinarily old fart, because I was saying this 60 years ago. This is the way it is. You prime the pump, you take your place in history, whether you think you deserve it or not.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, one of the things that's I hope you recognize that you do that pretty much every Sunday. People who don't know, you should follow Terry's YouTube channel, because every Sunday you do some drawing live, and it's incredibly informative. And if people aren't taking anything from it, they're lying. But it's you go ahead and do it. You don't have to do that. I mean, obviously there are benefits to you in terms of growing your audience and all that stuff, but the sheer aspect of showing people how you do things is important. You think you agree with that, right?
Yeah, and when I was younger, I was self-conscious. I wouldn't want to be. I would have been afraid. Well, who am I to say? But as I got older, and I would start, people would ask questions, and I would answer, and they would say, "Oh, thank you." And then I realized, if you don't share, you're an asshole.
Yes, absolutely. Wow. Yes.
That is true.
So yeah, it becomes important to, like, if you figured out which berries we can eat in this post-apocalyptic kingdom, share. Let us know which ones we can eat. How do we draw the circle, perfect circle, and make it look like, Spider-Man?
I want to come back to the Kickstarter, and I want to come back to Kickstarters in general. This particular Kickstarter, which the link is in the comments to this broadcast, so just go check the comments. You'll be able to get there if you haven't backed it yet. This is your third Kickstarter, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's like, how many pages is this? Like 350 pages or something like that with everything, or 320 or something like that?
I'm actually just finished almost finished the book today, and it's at 296.
296. That is crazy, amazingly good. And there's a ton of really cool, add-ons and other options that you can get. Like this shirt is freaking great. And this cover for I have the collected edition with this cover.
Those were old shirts from the 90s. We're bringing
Yeah, I'm sure. But you and I talked about this a couple of years ago about why you're doing Kickstarters and why and what it's gaining from you. What has that been for you? Because when you mentioned it to me, you're like, I've been living on Diamond's deadline for 25 years or 30 years, and we're not young, and so doing Kickstarters allows you to be able to continue to do the work you want to do, but do it differently. So why don't you talk about that just a little bit? What's the biggest thing you've learned about crowdfunding, or how are you using the Kickstarter process to continue to make the stories you want to make?
Well, Kickstarter is scary.
Sure.
It only works if everybody supports it. It's like Bitcoin. So it's a scary concept. But right now, in this window of time, it's working.
Mm-hmm.
I don't promise its future, but right now it's been a good solution for people. And the reason why so many comic book creators have run to that is not because of deadlines or deadline schedules and work, and not because of being shut out of Diamond. I mean, Diamond has always been very good to me. It's still an open door. It's not a distributor problem that I had. It boiled down to a tough times where the sales in comics got so skewed just towards the big two that everything else became what they call pull list plus one ordering.
Mm-hmm.
And pull list plus one has killed every series I've ever made.
I'm sorry for laughing because it's really not funny.
Yeah, it was
absolutely true.
It's the laugh of truth. Yeah, right, it's like, oh, there's the big mothership in the sky with the big laser beam.
It's true. I have a great LCS. I love them. I go there all the time, every week. And they're great to me, and they know. But if I don't tell them, hey, I liked issue 1, I'm probably not getting issue 2 because I didn't tell them to order issue 1 for me.
Yeah, and
I literally had that. There's a creator reach out to me and says, "Hey, I think you would like my book," and I'm like, "Well, I did. I loved the first issue, but I missed the second one because I didn't order it and it wasn't on the shelf." So
he's like, "Well, you're never going to see it on the shelf because they had one and it was gone the first afternoon."
Right.
So the pull list got it, and then they put one on the shelf. Nobody ever sees it. It'll never grow. So it is what it is, and so I have so many friends who are retailers. They're fighting to survive, and their way of surviving is it's an algorithm, and whatever gets all the hits gets the attention. And me, I get one hit every 1,000 customers or whatever. So yeah, it is what it is. It's a human algorithm at work. But anyway, so that does not exist at Kickstarter. At Kickstarter, maybe you only sell 10,000 copies of your comic book issue, but on Instagram you have 100,000 followers. So they just don't happen to support that one store in Philadelphia that's doing pull list plus one and all that. But you can go to Kickstarter, and now you can point 100,000 followers over to Kickstarter and say, buy my new art book, and they go do it. So it kind of exists because social media got a head start and got all these young artists to have followings. And all you need is somewhere to do business, and Kickstarter provided that.
Well, this is not a musical illusion, but necessity is the mother of invention. And when crowdfunding first came about, people, it seems to me, who were most desperate to make it work were those of us in the comics business, because what had been working in the past stopped. People change, marketing changes, lots of things change. Every 10, 20 years, there's going to be a market crash in comics. Usually when the economy is getting better, which disgusts me, but it's it breathes new life into the field. Now, 20 years from now or 10 years from now, it'll be something else. But people have been cartooning longer than anything else, except for maybe banging rocks together. So you're in the two right businesses.
I know. And both of the businesses, you look at the creators, like, okay, say the comic book artists that we admire in the 60s, they weren't doing that in the 50s and the 40s. They were doing different things. They evolved with newspapers used to be huge. There's a reason the name Hearst, and that used to be where to be. And magazines. So they were newspaper strips was a huge success. Magazine illustrators were a huge success. That's where all of my favorite guys came from. By the 60s, when Stan Lee found the right combination and made Marvel a hit, everybody wanted to work in comics, and we got all those great illustrators in comics. Thank God.
Absolutely.
So, I look back in order to figure out how am I going to go forward, especially the next 4 years or whatever. And I look backwards at what artists and musicians have lived through in the 20th century and how they had to navigate. And I think, okay. You just keep doing what you do and just keep surfing, wherever you find that wave.
Let me tell you a story. Many years ago, I was a judge at the Society of Illustrators cartooning contest, and it was great. But I was sitting there in this room judging people's art with guys like Jack Davis and Mort Walker.
Wow.
I've had a few of these. How the hell did I get into this room experiences? But for a comics fan from birth, this was an amazing experience. So when we weren't judging, they'd feed us great food, and I would talk with Jack because I'm a huge Jack Davis fan. I talked to everybody else too, but I started, Icebreaker was like, oh, I love your magazine covers. God, they're great. Time and TV Guide and whatever. And he was very nice and very pleasant and very happy and very sociable. And he explained in no uncertain terms that was a dead end, that you can't do that in magazine covers anymore. And I knew that because, there was fewer of those covers out there. And now there are hardly any magazines to begin with, let alone newspapers.
Right.
But my God, the idea that 100 years ago, 80 years ago, you can go just to the corner if you live in a big city and see, J.C. Leyendecker, and you see, Norman Rockwell, and, then you understand how we got EC Comics.
Mm-hmm.
It's great for your education, but it's wonderful for your sense of wonder.
Comics today, if you started pulling it up and look at its roots,
Sure.
My God.
Oh yeah.
So
yeah,
I love all those roots.
Yeah, me too.
I am so impressed that you were a judge at the Society of Illustrators. I grew up admiring.
I should point out
that's Mount Olympus.
when somebody asks me what type of music I'm into, I grew up in Chicago, so I have a pretty good background in blues and rhythm and blues and rock and roll. But my response is I'm into American roots music. Now, name me something that isn't part of that.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, and it's the same thing with comics. And one of the interesting things that I've experienced as I talk to people over the years is that the people who really get it and really get where they and understand where the medium that they're working in comes from are the people who respect it the most, who respect what they're doing the most. You'll run into people who you think are just the product of today, right? That they just popped out of existence, and you'll have a conversation with them. They're like, "There's amazing artists doing really interesting things," and they'll be like, "Oh yeah." But I went back and I looked at some stuff from a really long time ago, and that's really cool. Like I want to do things like people did back then, and I want to bring that forward. And you see the respect and the attention to how people do things, and people who are inquisitive about how did people do it before and how can I do it now, and maybe I can do it differently, but I don't want to ignore what they've done. And I see that in you. Like there are influences in your art that are apparent, right? But again, you've taken all of those roots and you've become Terry Moore, right? Which I think, and the fact that you respect that and understand that makes it all the more important.
It's just how life works. It's how every organism on the planet works. You just draw from everything and put your cellular pattern together, but all of your cells came from somewhere else.
Every single human on this planet stands on the shoulders of every single human who is ever on this planet.
Mhm.
And it's not linear at all. You can be watching television and something could be influenced by something else that you've never heard of and you never will hear of. Doesn't
Mhm.
matter. That's a real influence.
Yeah, and whether you think it's memorable or not, everything you've seen and heard, basically, everything that was ever made in the 20th century influenced me, and
Right.
continues in this one. But and then when you start looking backwards into history, everything you consume, it's all going into the mix. How
Yeah.
could you ever think it's
We had on the SquadCast several weeks ago, we had Karen Green, who's one of my favorite humans in the world because I am jealous of her work. She runs the comics world at Columbia University and has all the stacks to prove it. And her training and her background is in ancient cultures, so she gets that linear part. So if you sit down and talk with her at any convention about how we get from point A to point Z, she's got most of those connections. And you think about it, and it's just amazing what went into this. People will say, well, I don't like comic books because blah, blah, blah. And you realize that the stuff that they do like was critical to the evolution of comics. Don't talk to me about movies being better than comics without saying, oh, yeah, and Orson Welles had a major impact on comic book storytelling in the late 30s. We all stand on the shoulders of those who preceded us.
But here's the but.
Okay.
Yes to everything we've said. But how do we keep from being the 20th Bob Dylan clone?
Right.
How do you keep everybody from just doing the exact same thing? And when somebody has a fresh combination and they show you something in a way you've never seen before, that's what we adore. That's when something becomes like a yardstick. Like, for instance, think of everything that was written before Mary Shelley, and then
Right.
suddenly she writes a book, a story that has never been written before. She used the same English language and the same punctuation, but um,
Yeah.
she produced something that was so landmark. We
Her
stand on
world,
that shoulder now.
her worldview, and it was a very personal worldview, which we didn't see in literature then. We don't see in literature all that much now. You look at Wally Wood's studio, and you'll see, particularly in the late 60s, so many incredible people like Larry Hama and Howard Chaykin and Paul Kirchner and Ralph Reese and Dan Adkins. I mean, I can go on and on and on. There's just an infinite number, Wayne Howard, of terrific people. And yet, when they were working for Woody, they were doing Wally Wood stuff because that's the job. What happened, that they were a cover band. What happened was they came out on their own when they quit the cover band and started doing their own stuff, because they picked up the skills and the discipline in most cases to do that.
Yeah,
I
that's like,
really am proselytizing today, aren't I?
no, I am so into all that because, you read about Leonardo da Vinci. He had a little
Yeah.
tribe that traveled with him that were just living off of him, just like that. Just like, teach me, let me help, let me watch you do this and that. And that's how he produced a school that went forward. And everybody is, yeah, it's just how we operate as human beings. But I think what we're enchanted by is uh, because we're all doing this organic motion, evolving. When you get a little blip that's unusual, like Mary Shelley or the Beatles, writing tunes that are more catchy than somebody else, things like that. It really stands out, and I think it's what every creator chases is when I write a story, I'm not trying to write the same thing Harlan Ellison wrote. I'm trying to write something that would surprise and delight Harlan Ellison that he hadn't seen yet. Think of it that way. So you don't to compare it to music. If you see somebody on YouTube and they're playing Stevie Ray Vaughan licks, well, that is the 3 millionth time I've seen somebody play Stevie Ray Vaughan licks. Shut the fuck up. Play something new. Play something fresh. We already have Stevie Ray. We don't need you. If you want to learn from Stevie, that's fine. But hopefully you move off into your own world and become somebody brand new. And that's what we expect out of our writers and our artists. We already have Jim Lee. We don't need you. We already have Jeff Scott Campbell. We don't need you to be a clone,
But we need those influences.
We need those influences. Don't ignore them.
From one person. If you're a Stevie Ray Vaughan fan, God bless you. You've picked the right guy. But there's 100 other guys that you need in your mix.
You need way more than that. Don't waste your life being the clone. But you can't ignore those guys. You need to know them. You need to know everybody from Leonardo da Vinci to, the artist that's hot this year. But hopefully you take all that and become something new.
Every person has sort of a file of snapshots in their brains. And we don't make those pictures. Life makes those pictures and puts them in our brains. So the greater array of snapshots you have that you've been exposed to, the greater your knowledge base. What you do with it is you. But how you get it is all those people before us.
That's exactly right.
So,
and that's why you see younger creators tend to regurgitate the same stuff. Like, oh, I'm going to do a story about a young girl struggling with drugs in music culture. Yeah, okay, we've seen that a lot. If you're old, I don't need to see that again. But if you're old, you're pulling from stories that you've read for 70 years, and you've read everything for the last 400 years, and you've got a much broader story base to pull from. There's much more than that wild weekend in Vegas to write about.
Right. If I were a writer of short fiction, I would love to have the impact that Harlan Ellison's writing had. I would love to have that impact. That's a high watermark in my book. But I don't want to be Harlan. I want to be me. Thank you, Harlan, for helping make me.
Yeah.
There's an interesting aspect to that. Like, there's got to be some level of anxiety bordering on dread to actually do something, to make that thing, to write that story, to draw those pages where you are hoping that you're doing something original or different, or something that is true to you, that's not somebody else's thing, because you are pulling on all of those things. Is that something that you had to get over? Is that something you still struggle with? Like, are you worried, like, am I a hack here? Do you ever get to that? Do you ever get that feeling?
No, because unfortunately I have one quirk to me, which is I've been creating since I was 12. So when I go into my little zone, I have confidence that I can come up with something from nothing. And I feel like if I have good characters to work with, three-dimensional characters, that what they do next is always going to be surprising. And it's like interesting people. I did not expect for you to say that.
Yeah.
When you're saying everything we expect, you're boring, and we lose interest, and we wait until we kind of zone out until you say something interesting, then we're back. If you're on a 40-minute rant, and I hear, oh yeah. Oh wait, what was that? And so you kind of do that with your writing. You think about, okay, well, I've got a woman standing in front of a grave, and I've seen that a million times. And what I expect for her to do is to bow her head and, be thoughtful for a moment, and maybe cry, and then walk away, or maybe drop to her knees and cry, whatever, maybe drop the flower, all those things we've seen. Well, what I did with that moment was she took out a can of lighter fluid, sprayed it all over the grave, and set it on fire. Right. And she's standing in front of the grave of her abuser.
Right.
And I had never seen that before. So when I came up with that moment, I thought, yeah, good.
I want to take a minute, and I want to talk about a couple of women.
Whoa.
What do Francine and Kachu mean to you? They are characters that you created, that you've been writing writing and drawing for over 30 years now. What do they mean to you?
Those two very diverse characters were with me since my teenage creating years. When I was writing and drawing as a teenager in my notebooks, I first came up with the brunette character who was the woman you fall in love with. She would be the Mona Lisa, the muse, the cute girl in high school with the ponytail. She's all that. She's that character, the girl you fall in love with, but she's too pretty to talk to. The blonde girl, the shorter, feisty, dealing with a bad home life, was the girl that I was always friends with. I knew several girls like that when I was growing up, and we were in a lower class, blue collar neighborhood, and a lot of latchkey kids. And that kind of girl went on to become the bartender at age 19. And they're cute, but don't screw with them. They can fend for themselves. And I always knew those two characters. One of them was like a Jennifer Connelly, and one of them was like I don't know, that the casting changes every 5 years, but yeah, two very different characters, and I always had them. And uh, when I hit the wall with trying to break into comic strips, and it's begin again because I was trying to copy everybody else, and I finally realized, I'm doing the same thing I did in music. What I need to do is, what do I have? Do I have anything original? I got to that frustrating point. Do you have anything? So I took all that work, all those strips, I had bought a ton of it, put it on the floor, and I pulled out everything derivative. And the only thing original I had left was comic strips with the blonde and the brunette. And then I thought, if I put those two together, how would they get along? And I began thinking about uh, my gay cousin who was trying to be happy in a world that didn't give a damn about him. And he lost his life to AIDS. And I thought how tragic that was. And then I started thinking about it in that term. And then I thought, what if I did a love story where the alpha male was the blonde bartender girl, and still got the Jennifer Connelly, but just miscast everything. And I began thinking about Mike Nichols. I always so admired him. And I so admired not just his performance career with Nichols and May, but also his theater era. He was a wonderful director. And listening to an interview he did one time, it gave me the idea, I bet Mike Nichols would do this. Perfectly cast Wicked, or whatever play you want, The Death of a Salesman. Have your cast stand all up there. Okay, everybody is typecast. Now hand your script one actor to the right. Now let's go through the scene again. And now we've got, the Wicked Witch playing the ingenue, and the straw man playing the wizard. And, it's the same. And suddenly the scene reads differently. And it's the same scene that we've all heard before, but all the dialogue is coming from the wrong person. It became fresh. So when I miscast this love triangle and started looking at the story as miscast, but it's still, everybody was still fighting for their right to exist and to love and to be, but it's coming from new angles. It suddenly worked for me. I got it, and I suddenly had a new way to approach this story instead of writing, the 5 millionth guy and ingenue girl love story. And then I was able to plug into I'm an old straight guy, but I am surrounded by, gay people in my family and in my life and my friends and my dear ones. And I'm not stupid. I listen. I hear what they're going through. And then I just reflected that back into the story and tried to give that voice, So I think one of it's important, if you're a writer who can only write about yourself, then I don't know, write a memoir and then move on. But if you're going to write about the world, you need to be able to write about people who are not you, and write about them accurately, and do it in more, not just a journalist, but pull the heart into the matter and show why every human being has a voice and why it matters. And that was my mission with the story.
Yeah, it's an interesting phenomenon to talk with people and see how you can sort of twist that around into something else. Lawyers will refer to that as just flipping it. If you're making an argument about one thing, turn the argument inside out and see how that works. See if you can defend it, see if you can discuss it. Okay. For actors and performers of all types, the same thing is true. We are the product of our influences, but we have to be the product of ourselves. I never met Mike Nichols. I did meet Elaine May, very, very close to the Second City people. Some of them actually worked for me when I was on radio. And And so that community is a lot like the comics community for the same reasons. Because these people are improv actors and they've got to think on their feet. They've got to understand character, but they really have to understand commitment. I don't know a creator worth his or her salt who does not understand commitment.
Like I said, you've been writing that couple for a very long time, and I have to say that when you came back to them in Strangers 25 was it was like one of the greatest like you it's like pulling an old blanket over and just feeling, that warmth that it was not a pleasant time for those characters. Very much not a pleasant time. However, I don't think they loved each other more than they did in those moments in that series. Um, One of the things about and I if I'm the only one who calls it the Terryverse, that's fine because it's the Terryverse. It is, and you built it, and I don't know I'm not sure that you intended to build it the way you did, but when you got to Rachel, it really seemed to kick into gear to become this much larger world that they all lived in. Do you feel that Rachel was a turning point?
Yeah. The series between Strangers and Rachel
Echo.
was Echo. And near the end of Echo, there was going to be this cataclysmic event that would ripple down the West Coast. And I thought, who do I know on the West Coast? And to put in there and have that scene. And I thought, these two characters, Tamby and Casey, are probably relaxing at a nice modern house on the West Coast somewhere. They would probably experience this ripple. And so I put that in there and I thought, well, that was nice and tidy. But then I got to Rachel and we went into one of Aunt Johnny's house, a main character, Aunt Johnny. We go into her home and she has seemed to be such a dry, you think you have her figured out character. And when you get into the house, you learn more about her as a person. And in her study, she has a big painting, and the painting is by Kachu. And I realized, I don't even know if I had done this consciously or not. The reason I don't know if it's conscious is because I've been drawing a character that looks like Aunt Johnny for a long time. So this was my default Aunt Johnny.
Mhm.
But in Strangers in Paradise, there's a scene where Kachu has an art gallery and an exhibit, and these two ladies are standing in front of this painting, and they buy it. Well, in Rachel Rising, you realize that was Aunt Johnny and her partner Carol. And now that painting is in her home. And I realized they live in the same world. And the Jet that was the girl named Jet, who was Kachu's assistant at the art gallery, is the Jet that's in Rachel Rising. She's gone home to the small town, and she's a part of this. And that's when I realized, oh my God, it's all one. They all live in the same America at the same time, and I can do it all now. And that was a moment when I'm not that bright. It took a while for that to hit me, and it was when I got to the Aunt Johnny scene in Rachel that it really thought, eureka, because I realized I could do the same thing. One of my heroes, I always admired Robert Heinlein and the Heinlein verse. And as I read it, he had gotten about halfway through his career before he realized he could connect them all with Lazarus Long and have it all be one universe. And I realized that's exactly what I had just done. I had connected everybody through one or the other. But so from then on, everything I did was in the same possible time in the world.
your characters, I don't mean you, but any cartoonist characters that they develop, become family. Now, let us remember that not all families love everybody equally. Some don't get along. Yeah, that's Earth. That's the way it works. The difference is that you created all of them. Oh, if one is too persnickety, that's on you. And what you do with that is you make it a character point, you make it a story point. It works.
And that's why you keep going back and doing it again the next day.
Yeah.
And it becomes a sanctuary, when the world is all CNN bad news. You go back to the drawing table and go to your happy place. And that's what I admired the most about Peanuts. That man lived in a happier world than we did. And I admired that aspect of it. And I wanted.
Also, it turns out a stranger world than we do.
So yeah, it's not just like how did he use a pencil? It's also like how did he escape and live there?
Right.
Yeah.
That's exactly.
Also, if somebody's being too persnickety, there's always Zoe to take care of them.
It's nice to have somewhere to channel all these aspects of
Yeah.
a person.
I had a couple of quick hits. There's a couple of questions. Black and white. Why did you not use color? And I know there was probably a financial reason at day one, but why have you stayed there?
My heroes, my cartooning heroes worked in black and white. Whether it's Bill Watterson or Robert Crumb, or all the guys in Mad Magazine. Mad Magazine was black and white, so I didn't see the need for color. Color was a comic book thing to me.
Mhm.
And because I wasn't doing, superhero comic, I thought, you know what? I think I feel more, I'd rather look like it came from self-publishing, a small press in New York, than it came out of an office, with colors. And also, I was one guy doing it all.
Yep.
And I could barely make my 6-week deadline, getting it written and drawn, inked, and to the printer, and then back to the distributor in time, and then start another one the same way. So giving it to a colorist would have taken another 2 weeks, and I didn't have that time.
Yeah.
So once in a while we would do a color issue, but it was, we planned for it.
I am a huge fan of black and white work because I started out reading newspaper comic strips when I was ridiculously small. And the day I realized that the best Steve Ditko work I'd ever seen was in black and white with all those beautiful wash tones, speaking about Archie Goodwin over at Warren Magazines, I realized black and white is a different form of color.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I grew up on Mad Magazine and Creepy.
Yeah, me too.
EC and all that same stuff, and Underground Comics. That's all black and white stuff, and so it's on. Yeah, I mean that was just the way to do it.
I'm not complaining. It's
good because you're making no ground here.
No, I love it. It's a question out there, and it you stand out. There's not many people who are even who are doing that today. And God love you for the scenes in Russia with all the snow and like it works. It works, and it had to be painstaking for all of that.
If you have color, you begin to rely on it to finish some art, and you begin incorporating it into the art thinking and the styling of it. So I never had that. I had to draw it, and I had a more interesting adventure in inking by staying in black and white because you have to draw whatever you want to insinuate. If I don't put it there, only a few times can you insinuate something by its absence. But yeah, usually you had to figure out some clever way to think how do I portray? All I have is a crow quill and a brush. How do I portray cold?
Right.
And that's a fun challenge.
Right. Right. Yeah, you're always thinking, and sometimes you overthink. I found that the trick for many cartoonists is to get them to pull back on thinking sometimes. No, stop. You got it.
Oh yeah, I've gone too far several times, and that's a lesson.
Yeah, it's not an easy lesson to learn either.
No, that's part of the journey.
Hmm.
And how many times have you seen your mentor say it's just as important what you leave out?
Yeah.
Sure,
Oh yeah.
absolutely.
I have no problem when I'm writing something. For example, my weekly column, Pop Culture Squad. I have no problem writing some phrase that I think is just brilliant, and then later on cutting it because it's not absolutely necessary. And I've had enough words already. If you can kill your darlings,
Yes, kill your darlings.
you
Yes.
know, you can communicate. You can be a storyteller. You can't be a storyteller if you don't know how to kill your darlings.
I have quite a few pages here in the tubs that I got 1 or 2 pages in with the pencils and thought, nope, not the right direction.
Yep.
They stay in the tub, and I went and drew them.
I have a question. There's a question from the audience. Does Lando have a chance? I don't know what that means. Do you?
No, it's Max all the way. I'm sorry, bud. He's talking about the Formula One race in Vegas this weekend.
Okay.
And if Max Verstappen wins it, he'll be the second youngest 4-time champion in Formula One history. And Max is a beast. Lando's fast, but Max is a beast.
I had another question, and this is something that I've thought about for a long time. So, Abstract Studios, intentional to get to the front of the Diamond catalog?
Yeah. I was gonna name it Abbey Press or something, but there was already an.
My dad worked for a company called Abbey Press.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I used to organize my comics by publisher, so it was in the front, and then I'm in the middle of a reorg where I'm just going by alphabetized. So, but that do you think that over the years that made a difference?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I did my homework before
Sure.
my first comic came out, so I actually started this whole campaign in the middle of '92. I had my epiphany in the middle of '92. I started working on a comic book story then, and putting my Xerox together, and then going out to shows and handing it around and getting feedback. And so as I'm learning, I'm deciding to self-publish and all that. I met Jeff Smith and talked to him and talked to other self-publishers that were very savvy at the time. Savvy, there's an old word. But yeah, and I was even all the way down to like talking to retailers like, do you care what the name of my company is? Does it matter in the catalog? And they said, yeah, it does matter because I am paying attention at the front of the catalog. And by the time I get to the middle, I'm whipping through for just the stuff I recognize. So yeah, even that was a conversation, that little detail.
Yeah. Yeah. It's critical. The sad part about the business of comics has been the fact that we sell to retailers, not to readers. You got to get the retailers excited, and they, if they're good, in turn will, find you those readers, and that's great. But they're the ones who look at that same catalog every month and have to literally bet the rent on what they order. So I'm very, very, very sympathetic, and it does help to understand more than just the basics of how all that works. Because you're spending all this time and energy creating great stuff, and if nobody knows it's out there, then what the hell are you wasting your time for?
Yeah, and a lot of people lose motivation when their sales go down. But, the retailer is going through that catalog like a grocery list. Okay, nobody ate the bananas this time, so I'm not getting any more of those.
Right.
Right.
That kind of thing. It's that simple. But the guy who made the bananas broke his back out there in the hot field to get them, and you got to figure out somewhere else to something else to do with them, or make them sexy or something.
Yeah. I mean, well, that's one of the
That's
things
how
that
the banana was born.
That's how banana strips were formed. Yeah, that's why banana started stripping.
yeah. I mean, this is an example of why Kickstarter and companies and crowdfunding, venues are thriving. I think a little bit today. I just looked. I've backed 266 Kickstarters in the
Wow,
last 8 years. I guess
God bless you.
it's a lot. I didn't realize it,
Yeah, you said
but
that out loud. Yeah.
yeah, it's a lot.
I've
My
never
wife's
tallied.
watching, so I'm sure she's not happy about that.
Yeah, I've never tallied mine up. It's
Well, I
more
didn't
than
tell. It's right there. It tells me how many I backed.
it's probably more than I should, and I have lots of these giveaways that I've probably never opened. I don't care. I'm backing a project, but I think it has saved comics in terms of our creative momentum. I'm not putting down the X-Men or the 200 Green Lantern books or whatever. That's fine. But you want something new, that's tough in any medium.
And book lovers know that. They know to shop all different venues. It's the casual person that may miss
Right.
out. But people
That's
who
true.
love books and comics, and they know where to find it.
Yeah.
And
No, you're right.
the thing I love about books, the reason why none of this was a waste of our time was because books will wait for you. And we make a book, and somebody may find it in next year or in the 50 years from now, but it'll be there waiting for them. It's cool.
So, one of the things about I want to just want to wrap up on the Kickstarter. The covers that's still going on. There's 8 days left. There's still some interesting add-ons or interesting things that people who with a lot of money can go and get. But the book itself is fantastic. But you said something about some new stuff. Is there some new stuff coming that's that you're working on?
That
Well,
you
one
can
of,
talk about.
one of the things we did with the Kickstarter is we decided I'm dying to do this, a new comic book story of Strangers in Paradise. So it's a one-off issue of Strangers in Paradise set in the West. And I drew a cover for that, posted it on the Kickstarter, and you can see that. And I love Westerns, grew up with them. So I just can't wait to do this.
Yeah. I have to say something here. Um, Strangers in Paradise was my late wife's favorite comic book by far. She was a huge comics fan. That's how we met. Her daughter just replaced just got a job in the comic book store. She was 15 at the time, and I met her mother there, and she loved comics. She bought lots. She read them all. Rangers was her favorite, and I got to thank you for that, for making her life that much better. So, thanks, Terry.
Thank you, Mike. That means the world to me.
We'll all cry. It's fine. No problem.
I mean, it's you're talking about people's lives, when you
Sure.
put stuff out there and you hope to make a connection. And when you make a connection, it's just, it's just nothing like it.
And you never know. You rarely know the connections you make.
You tell me that today, and tomorrow somebody will tell me it was, it's a joke. So it's, you happy
Yeah,
where you
I mean,
landed.
Well, there's no manual for life. Lead it yourself.
it's I I love so with my shop, I would say just anything Abstract Studios puts out, I'm getting. It was that like, and I couldn't wait for every month. Like as soon as there was a new, whatever it was, whether it was Motor Girl or whether it was 5 years or whatever, it went to the top and went, and I loved it because every time I opened a book of yours, and I was transported to that world. There was something very particular about the paper and the pages and the depth that that it's a word I come back to when it's something that is captivating to me, that it's deep. I can fall into those pages, and I did that with all of those things, and I look forward to doing it again, in the future. But like, it's important for people like you to understand that. It's important that people tell you that you hear it. You can do with it as you please, and obviously it means something to you what Mike just said, but I thank you. I thank you for doing this. Thank you for talking to me. I've been super excited to do it, but um thank you for all of the amazing art and story that you've created. It will live forever.
Thank you, man. As I get older, and if the fear is that it fades away, um, have it ping back. It's sometimes you make a book and you put it out there, and it's like a message in a bottle. So if anything pings back, it's a blessing. Thank you, guys.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Terry. It's your work. And that's the reason why we're talking right now.
I mean, we could talk about other people's work, if you want.
But only if we're nasty about it. You have to be nasty.
I mean, I know, I know I can say an issue, and we can go off, but we'll save that for the next time. Thank you so much for doing this, Terry. I really, really am super, super thankful that you did it. Again, go to the comment section of this podcast, wherever you're watching it, wherever you're listening to it. Subscribe to it, but also you'll find the link to the Kickstarter covers, which ends in 8 days and has plenty of opportunity for you to get on and get that book. It's going to be just a piece of gorgeous art.
It's going to be a fortune to mail.
Yeah. I don't have to think about that part.
Yeah, that's true. Thanks,
All right,
Terry.
Thanks very much.
Thank you
Thanks,
very
guys.
much for being here.
Thank you.
We appreciate it.
All
Great,
right, Mike.
great cartoonist. America's best.
What?
One of America's top cartoonists.
Absolutely. And as I said earlier, he's an inspiration to new creators. He is an influence, and the fact that he did his own thing the way he did it for so long and continues to. This is not the end of Terry Moore.
No.
But yeah, it was a great honor to have that conversation. So
Yeah, I agree. I absolutely agree.
all right, Mike, we're going to take a break for a week. It's holidays. People have family and stuff. They're not going to have time for us, and I'm not going to have time for you guys. Unfortunately, I'm going to be super busy for the next week.
Oh, I've got plenty of time. Come on over, folks. Just kidding.
Nope. But we will be back in 2 weeks. We will be back on December 3rd. We are going to have Chris Condon on.
That's Tuesday. Tuesday,
December 3rd. Tuesday. We're going to have a Tuesday. And then we'll be off Thursday. And then the following week that we're going to come back, we have a heavy schedule. We're going to just tease you with Chris Condon. We met him earlier this year at Ithaca. He was up at Ithaca with us.
Right.
And he's writing for both Marvel and DC right now. Plus he's got his own creator-owned stuff that he's been working on. So that's going to be terrific. The following week, the 10th of December, we will be back again on Tuesday with a double feature. We're going to have Tim Seeley and Mitch Gerrits on the show together. They're going to talk about, whatever they want to talk about, but probably Vigilante, which they're working on together for DC. So, and then we have some guests scheduled after that. You guys are going to have to tune in to find out who they are. It's going to be good. I want to say happy Thanksgiving to everybody because we won't see you until afterwards. And
happy Thanksgiving. I am so looking forward to our Thanksgiving Day feast here of prime rib.
I'm looking forward to your Thanksgiving Day feast for you, and someday we'll get to share that or somehow figure it out.
Oh yes, we should.
But in the meantime, everybody enjoy yours. Stay tuned to popculturesquad.com. Stay tuned to us on all of our social medias because we're trying to stay as active as we can. I have more followers on Blue Sky today than I have on Twitter and that I've ever had on Twitter. Which
should I sign up for that? Should I be involved?
Okay. You don't need to.
Thank you.
It's not for you.
I do like the idea that it's beating the shit out of Twitter.
Yeah.
At least in our community.
Yeah. So anyway, everybody keep doing what you're doing. Keep the hope alive, and we'll see you later.
Thank you, folks, as always, for putting up with us for 2 hours. We greatly appreciate it.
All right, bye everybody.
This has been a production of the Pop Culture Squad Network. PopCultureSquad.com. How do you nerd?